afternoon and welcome to A Gathering Place, hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce. And we are excited to have our special guests here from South Carolina Solid, an emerging activist organization here in South Carolina. And we want to find out what they're about and meet the members and what they're going to do in the future. So first I want to welcome Ebony Hughes, president of South Carolina Solid, also known as SC Solid. Hi, Ebony. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Miss Marilyn? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for coming and joining us to learn more about South Carolina Solid. And I also want to bring on Deontay Winchester. Hey, Deontay, how are you?
Hey, Miss Marilyn. How you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. And thank you for joining us today to learn more about South Carolina Solid. And if more members come on board, we'll just have them join us as they arrive. Well, my name is Marilyn Hemingway, everyone, and we're excited to learn more about South Carolina Solid. And Ebony, can you tell us about South Carolina Solid, its mission, and how did this group come about?
Well, South Carolina Solid it's a grassroots organization that is geared toward we're creating community unity through political activism and education. So how we got started really was through after the George Floyd murder, a young lady in our community actually wanted to get some folks behind her, a teenager, to help her with a protest that she was able to successfully run along with a group of other people, other organizations in Pawleys Island and Georgetown, and we were able to do that in solidarity with the police and everybody involved. So that's how we got started. But what we realized was that we didn't want to just start with a protest, because it takes more for change to just protest. We wanted to do other things that will make long-lasting changes.
So what are those things that you wanted to do to make long-lasting changes?
Well, I want Deontay's input on this one, but what we wanted was to have educational components, and the key to long-term change is actually behind policy and legislative changes.
We certainly want to be a group because what we found is that a lot of groups are advocating for things like racial inclusion and diversity within our local area, but no one is really pushing for legislative and policy change at the local, state, and even federal level. So we wanted to come in and kind of fill that gap and be an organization that can push policies that will serve all people within the community.
Okay, very good. So when you say fill that gap, are there any specific issues right now that you are looking at to change the laws?
Not specifically as of right now, any one issue. Mainly we're trying to get our organization kind of in line and everything up and running, and then after that we will look at our legislation. But what we're primarily focusing on right now is the grassroots effort to change things locally in Georgetown. For example, there's a petition out right now, and I'm unsure if all of the viewers are aware of it, but there was a noose that was found in a county vehicle in Georgetown. So there's a petition out right now. We're asking everyone if you would to go ahead and sign that petition so that the county knows that we will not stand for racist acts here in Georgetown.
All right, very good. So what is that petition once again, and where can we go to sign that petition?
Right now, it's an online petition. So you can go to change.org/BLM Georgetown.
Okay. And then you want everyone to sign it. And I'm sure you want everyone to share that petition, because what was the subject again? There was an employee of Georgetown County that did what?
Yes. Well,
I want to make sure we're clear on what happened.
It's a serious thing. There was a employee or a group of employees that had a noose around the rearview mirror of a county vehicle. And that noose was riding around in that vehicle for at least 3 weeks in a predominantly Black community, which is a serious offense. And we've addressed this issue along with some other organizations with county council. And at this point, from what I can understand, that is closed. So we would like for everyone to please fill out that petition. Again, go to change.org/BLM Georgetown. Fill it out and please share it. Share it to everyone who you know, because injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. And that's something that Dr. King said. And even in the passing of the late Lewis, Congressman Lewis, his whole thing was just do what's right. And if county council just does what's right, then, and also stand up for the Black Lives Matter resolution that they literally just put into place maybe a month or so ago, they need to live up to that. And that's another thing with policy. Policy and change, policy is only as good as it's enforced.
There you go.
You have to keep people accountable for what they have promised us. And I see the comments here, and I appreciate everybody that's going to be signing this petition, because we just want to do what's right for everyone so that it's a safe place for everyone.
That's right. And which leads me to a question that I want to get into, personal, your personal stories on how you got into activism, because it does roll into how it impacts everyone. And I want to make a point with this, that when historically, if you look at the Black community, when we fight for the rights of the Black community, we also fight for the rights of everyone. And you can see it historically. So as individuals, tell us your stories, Deontay. How did you get into activism?
Well, I think my story started because when I was in the military, I knew that racism was a thing, but I had not personally experienced any acts of racism. And it's sad that my first experience with blatant racism in my face happened while I was serving this country. But at the time, I was stationed in Korea, and I was playing basketball, and basically there was a gentleman that straight up called me the N-word right there in my face. I won't say what happened after that because I don't advocate for violence. But needless to say, that gentleman won't be making remarks like that anymore. But that showed me more than ever that we still live in a time where racism is alive and well. So years after that, I actually ended up being medically retired from the U.S. Army. And I came back here to Georgetown. And what actually sparked my interest in activism, it actually started because I love to mentor the youth, and that's what most of my work is geared towards, mentoring, educating the youth. However, what I realized is there is a threat to many of our youth right now. Many of the young men that I'm mentoring, I'm seeing individuals their age being shot by police and things of that nature. So how can I advocate for the mentoring and the upbringing of these young men when there's threats to their lives every day, and I'm not doing anything about that? So part of me doing what's right and making sure that these young people grow up and be successful adults is to make sure they live in a safe and healthy world and society that is fair and equitable to them as well as everybody else.
So how does that manifest itself, Deontay, when you say you want to show these young people a more fair, equitable world? What are a couple of things that you're doing specifically to help them lead them down that path?
Well, for one, as Miss Ebony already mentioned, there was one young lady, Miss Eileen Carter, and she was brought to me because she wanted to go ahead and organize another rally. following George Floyd. So along with her, I kind of gathered the resources and I started making a lot of phone calls with county officials, chief of police in Georgetown, the sheriff, and we got this thing started to provide them a positive and productive way to let out those frustrations and give them a way and show them that you can stand up for what you believe in and you don't have to sit there and tolerate oppression and discrimination and anything else that they may be facing as they grow up. Fight back, stand up.
Stand
John
for
Lewis,
something.
there you go. Cause some good trouble.
Yes, some
And that's
necessary
that's
trouble.
what I'm certainly trying to impart to these young people, that there is an avenue to do things productively, certainly legally, but definitely do something when you see something wrong. Stand up.
Very good. And I totally agree with you on that. Stand up, stand for something. And Ebony, you are a big advocate for our youth, just like Deontay. You focus specifically on education, but I know you understand that all issues are interconnected. But how did you get involved with being an advocate for your community?
Well, it started early on because I was trying to find my way in life, and I would hear stories that my grandfather would used to tell me. You know, he and my grandmother can remember when, and my mom, when Dr. King was killed, when JFK was killed, and you know, I thought that was a thing of the past. People fighting for equal rights. We all know that there's certain injustices that still go on, but I never really realized until some years ago that a lot of the injustices were systematic. So it was on one end, uh, it was difficult to try to figure that out whenever you're trying to advocate for change, but there were certain limitations that actually were embedded into the law. So how I got started really was with what I do, which is insurance. But anytime that I help someone, they would need something, but there were other things that they needed other than just health insurance. Sometimes they say, Ebony, I have asthma. But when I go into their home, I see that they have mold issue. So then I realized and understood that what linked their health problems with the condition of their homes, and they just didn't have the financial means to fix the ultimate problem, which was issues with their housing. And they began to explain to me certain issues. So I started reaching out to other organizations just on my own, to try to figure out, was there a way to help people like senior citizens and people with disabilities get certain things done. And I knew that there were funds out there. I knew that there were grants to help people that are vulnerable, but I just had to find a way. So that's how I got started, was actually through my own business, because again, everything's interconnected. So I would get calls, and that's basically how I got started. But what really put the fire underneath me is that whenever everything happened during the pandemic exposed a lot of issues that people were complaining about all along. But now everyone was at home to see it. People could see those issues now. And so then I realized it was more than what I could do just on my own. I had to reach out to other people that we could be connected so that we can address issues on a greater level than what I could do individually. So that's how I got started. And so I'm so appreciative to have people like Mr. Deontay, and we have our secretary, Ms. Shauna, and Ms. Pilor, and all these different folks that are so very strong in our community, and we're linking together to make a bigger impact.
You have said a mouthful there, and it's a lot to unpack, and I'm going to get to that. But first, I want to remind everyone that you are watching A Gathering Place, hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, and we have our special guests today, Ebony Hughes and Deontay Winchester with South Carolina Solid, an emerging activist group here in Georgetown. But it's the name South Carolina Solid for a reason, because they have plans to expand and network with other organizations, which they're actually already doing now. I want to bring up a comment by Mr. David Warner. And David, thank you for sharing this comment with us. And it is, I had to file a federal lawsuit against Horry County Schools related to the American with Disabilities Act. advocacy almost always spills into other pieces of advocacy. Yes, I'm advocating for my child with special needs. He is a white boy, yet I'm helping so many other children who are Black and Hispanic. It's a beautiful thing. And Ebony, you spoke on that a little bit also. It's not just our children or us. When you advocate for your community, it almost always impacts everyone. So it's not in a silo that you just operate for advocacy. It may be a personal reason that you become an advocate, but it always impacts the greater community. So I think you hinted towards that already, Ebony. So David, we want to thank you for making that remark, because the American with Disabilities Act, you can also trace the roots of that back to the civil rights movement. All right. And I want to talk about South Carolina Solid and its future plans. So I have a quick question here from Miss Joan Dore. Hello, Joan. Thank you for your question. Could South Carolina Solid help with poll workers? Deontay, do you have an answer to that question? Can South Carolina Solid help with poll workers?
Well, we certainly can get out and advocate for individuals to get the proper training, and advocate with the county election officials to get the right people in those locations, so that there is not a shortage of poll workers like we did for the past election, and there's not lines stretched out so long that individuals end up leaving because they don't have any more time to sit there and wait to vote. So that's definitely an issue, and that's something that we want to look into, being able to affect positive change in the community.
It's an issue not only to make sure we have enough poll workers, but it's an issue right along with getting registered to vote, having the opportunity to vote, which is impacted by the poll workers. And on the average, the poll workers are older folks, and under the pandemic, many of them do not want to work, which we can't blame them. We need to look out for our elders and respect them. So what happened during the primary, specifically in Georgetown, they actually had to end up combining some polling locations because they didn't have enough workers. And I know there's been some discussion with South Carolina Solid to help solve that problem. One of the strengths of South Carolina Solid is that you guys tend to be younger, and our young folks need to step up and get trained and become poll workers. So thank you very much. Yes, go ahead.
One of the issues that we identified, Ms. Marilyn, and thank you for that too, Ms. Joan, is that it's not that there was necessarily a shortage of poll workers. There was a missed opportunity to use poll workers. And I don't want to come out and blatantly say that it was racism based. However, it's difficult not to believe that when there are African Americans in these jurisdictions that are qualified and certified to do this job, but they weren't called on at that time.
Yes, and it actually is a paid position. It's kind of like semi-volunteer, semi-paid, but it's a little money, folks, you get for the training and also for working on election day. So thank you, Deontay, for that information. It is so important that people think beyond just registering to vote and voting. It is a whole election system that we need to make sure that it works so our vote counts. And it's good to know that South Carolina Solid is out here trying to be part of that solution. So Ebony, what as president of South Carolina Solid, what are other issues that you're looking at? Not specifically any laws to change right now, but have there been any discussions about any specific issues for South Carolina Solid?
Well, we've talked about a number of different things. Right now, voting has been our primary focus right this moment, because it is a very crucial time as far for education and for activating people to get in place, like you said, with polling. But we also realize that the environmental issues that we have here in Georgetown and in this state is a big issue when it comes down to certain industries and how they impact and where they're located in usually poor, marginalized areas. Mm-hmm. Also, we have also talked about different social justice, and also the census is another big topic that we are trying to push for people to complete the census. That's going to impact us for the next 10 years. So we are pushing people to participate more, and also one of the issues that we've addressed with SC Solid is that it seems that participation is a issue, and part of the reason why people don't participate is because they are not sure of how. They don't know the laws. They don't know how, even example for how county council works. So that's the big thing there for education. I think Deontay can really speak on that one.
Yes, education is paramount. These individuals need to understand not only how the process works, but they need to believe in the process. And that's why education is important. And I think along those same lines, we also need to be looking at things like gerrymandering, because that still happens, and redlining and things of that nature. Also, maybe even the electoral college, because the popular vote doesn't always win the election. So there are a number of topics that we want to look at covering voting in general. But right now, we certainly do want to educate the community at large and get everyone out to the polls and vote for the candidate that they feel best suits them and their family's needs.
So when you talk about education, you're not just talking about K through 12. You're talking about what type of education? Are you talking community education, higher education? So what are you saying regarding education?
We're talking about even right now, we know that we can't have large assemblies because of the pandemic that's going on. So even if we have to do training seminars via Zoom or things of that nature, we want to get out into the community and just educate them on voting rights, the ways in which you register, and everything of everything like that. We're not talking K to 12, which that's something that we certainly advocate for as well as education. But we're talking about educating the adults in the community so that they can assist in educating the K through 12 about issues that are important to the community.
Very good.
Absolutely.
Go ahead, Evan.
And if I could also add something in there, sometimes education is just, sometimes it's about actually participating. So one of the things that we have been promoting is that people show up to your city and county council meetings, show up to your voters education meetings, and sometimes just being in the atmosphere, it makes you aware of what's going on. And through awareness, it brings about education that sometimes is not about sitting down in a classroom setting. You have to participate in order to know those things. And usually people that are more engaged in these type of meetings are people that are going to be set up to actually run for certain things. And I think that also showed itself in the primaries, at least here in our area a little bit ago, is that there were not people to run in certain positions. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of the issue, is that it's just a lack of participation. So that's why we encourage people to just, and so let me also make this clear, with the pandemic, some people don't need to show up in person necessarily. They post just like how we're doing right now virtually. They post things live. You can tune in, you can type letters and have them read aloud in these meetings.
So just so I'm clear, because I haven't been out and about recently, Georgetown County Council, City of Georgetown, they're online with their meetings. So you don't necessarily have to be there in person, but you can participate online.
That's true. Now we encourage people to be there, but for the safety of people, and if they have, if they are vulnerable, we understand that. But I just don't want people to think that because maybe they can't come because of their work schedule, but you still can participate because yes, they are online. So that means you can watch it while it's happening. Or if you can't watch it then, you can watch it later. And that way you're informed of what's going on in your city. Most people are oblivious to what's even going on. So
that's
yes,
they
do.
And I'm glad you brought up the awareness piece of it. And I'll just give one example. They don't do it in Georgetown, in the city or the county, but an issue that folks can bring up. If you come out to a county council or a city council meeting, you're going to realize that child care, for example, is not provided. And that's huge for single mothers. All right, because they're a huge population in our area. So the reason I give childcare as an example, if you come to those city or county council meetings, you're going to realize that it's so much easier if somehow they could figure out how to provide childcare so single mothers could come and listen and be a part of the process. But how do you make that happen? You need to get to know your county council members. You need to get to know your city council members, and then you need to bring that issue to them. Why doesn't the city or the county provide childcare during meetings so that single mothers and single fathers can be present at that time? And that's an issue that maybe South Carolina Solid could take up and get an ordinance or policy change to allow that piece to happen and more people can participate. And I'm just bringing that up because that's such a good example of what getting involved could possibly do. And there are other cities around this nation that actually do it. They provide childcare. So that's a immediate, real impactful issue that can happen if someone brought it forward to the right people. So are there any other issues that you're presenting, thinking about, or is that one that, it's just a good example? Your thoughts regarding that?
Deontay?
And Deontay, we're going to throw it to you, or at least Ebony just did.
Well, thank you for that, Ms. Hughes. Childcare is certainly a big issue, and I think it certainly impacts certain individuals' access to be able to come to these meetings that are held at the city and county level. So it's certainly something that I would be willing to advocate for, and I believe the organization can look at taking this on as one of the issues that we advocate for. Above and beyond that, once we bring this to the attention of these individuals who sit in these seats, if they're unwilling to go ahead and accept these policy changes, well, then guess what? It's time to start advocating for people to replace them.
Right. That's it. And another thing, I'm glad that's a good point, Deontay. I wanted to also address Mr. Warner here. He said that the internet needed to be available, and that is something that we've looked at. Internet does need to be available, and through the pandemic, what we understand, and we've always understood all along, but it's now blatantly in your face, that internet is not a luxury. It is an absolute necessity for everybody, from the kids all the way up, and there are things that are going on long term that when it comes down to putting Wi-Fi and the internet down, that's something that other cities have for taxpayers. It's free Wi-Fi for everybody. And I think that's something that needs to go on, because if we can fund bike trails and things of that nature, which are important also, and we put millions, into other projects, then this is something that also needs to be addressed.
Yes, it does. And it impacts not only what's happening in the pandemic and that knowledge, but it also impacts education of our children, also education of ourselves. It also impacts career and business opportunities, because if the libraries are shut down because of the pandemic, or if they have limited hours, you could be at home completing a job application. So the internet, also known as broadband, it is a necessity, as you say, and that actually is another fine example of why we need to get people involved with government, understand how government works, and also understand that you need to change some ordinances and laws so that it benefits the majority of the people. And I say that because most people don't realize I actually have a background in broadband back in the day, and I've done a lot of stuff. And there was money under the Obama administration. I think it was $8 billion towards extending broadband to rural areas, but it didn't happen. What the pandemic revealed is it didn't happen. And why it didn't happen is, if you were involved, you would have realized your Public Service Commission had a lot to do with that. And once again, this goes back to getting involved with government and understanding how government works. Because I bet you a lot of people don't even know what a Public Service Commission is. And they regulate our utilities. And broadband is considered a utility. All right. So why did it expand to rural areas? Well, it depends on how the corporations like AT&T defined rural. And a lot of them defined it so it really just covered suburban areas and not really rural areas. But if
Right.
you are involved with your government, if you are involved with groups like South Carolina Solid, you would know this so that you could go and fight for
Right.
the right to have broadband.
That's
You know?
it.
Yeah,
Can
that's
also
actually a good example. Go ahead, Ebony.
I'll give one more example, and this is something I think would hit home to a lot of folks in the past. And we have another member, Miss P. Lore. She actually brought up an issue that I had talked with someone at the courthouse about, and it was about the ability for people to be able to have tiny homes. Having equity is a big thing for part of equality. And so for people that want to have tiny homes are affordable, tiny homes are efficient, tiny homes give people ownership.
Yes,
And
they do.
so we have where I brought up an idea, we need to have a tiny home community possibly for our veterans. You have so many of them that are homeless, and it's senseless, but something that, as far as in changing policy and ordinances, we have to be able to change ordinances such as the one in Georgetown where tiny homes are prohibited. You can't do that. So that's another example of something that we would like to tackle in the future, are tiny homes, so people can have ownership.
So let's be clear on the ordinances, and this is such a good example, Ebony. So thank you for bringing it up. And Deonta, you could jump on to this also. As we've been discussing tiny homes and the ordinances do not outright ban tiny homes, and people have to understand that. What they do is they limit the sizes of the house. They're very specific on how much land you can build on and the size of the homes. And because of that, it prohibits tiny homes, in particular in the city of Georgetown. So that's when South Carolina Solid, I understand, start talking about we need to focus on changing ordinances and the laws, because the more educated the group became, the more they realized we got to change laws. And that could change entire communities. Deonta, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think first of all, many individuals don't understand the implications of these ordinances. We're talking about right now that tiny homes aren't banned outright. However, there is a regulation as far as the size that a home must be. So that's more or less banning tiny homes. However, the thing about this is above and beyond the fact that it limits the type of homes we can have and the ability to build equity more quickly, because the home is less expensive and more affordable, and we can get more families into ownership. It also benefits the big builders more than Joe Citizen, because these big builders come in and they're building all of these homes and they're making all of the money. That's what it's about at the end of the day. Big business.
And I know there was a point, if you guys remember, it was a previous discussion we were discussing the tiny home situation. An example they brought up was in public housing, where there are a lot of single mothers, once they reach a certain point and they want to move out of public housing, that they're actually punished in a way that forces them back into public housing when they actually have enough money to even pay maybe a down payment and a monthly mortgage on tiny homes. Do you two remember that particular conversation and kind of maybe clarify it a little bit more than I just explained it? But I mean, this is a real impact, Ebony. And I keep going back to single mothers, and I'm not a single mother, nor am I a product of single mother, but I am a Black female. And
yes.
And many of us in the Georgetown community are single mothers. And I see that and I want to help my community. So that is, and I bring that up because it also shows it's an impact. It's all interconnected.
It is.
Just because I'm not a single mother does not mean it doesn't impact me. All right. But it does. It impacts all of us. So Ebony, your thoughts regarding that, if you could clarify that, if you remember that particular conversation earlier.
Deonta, answer that one, because I'll go off on another tangent because I don't.
I guess I'm getting her hot on that one.
I think I need a Uno skip card on this one myself, or a reverse.
Well, hopefully our other folks will be able to jump on and clarify that, because I think Pilo and Christina were really, really on fire regarding that issue.
Well,
But it does speak to why we need to get involved, and why it's so important that we have an organization, such as South Carolina Solid, to close the gap on education regarding how ordinances and laws are created and how they impact us. Real impact. Go ahead, Ebony.
well, speaking to that, I think most people know that I haven't always lived here. I've lived in Georgia before, and one of the I don't know they had a particular regulation that if you had a lease and where you live had this in place, you could actually use the as you pay your rent, it will go toward helping you build credit for home ownership. Those are things that other states have in line that I haven't seen here. I think that would be helpful, because whenever people have to pay security deposits, to me, security deposit equals down payment. As you're paying rent, to me, that almost equals, if you can pay rent above a certain point, then you're also able to pay for a mortgage, which equals equity in home ownership. So those are things that, that we've had talks about. It's going to take us some time, but those are things that we would like to address. And we appreciate anyone's support as we tackle those different issues.
It's interesting that you said that it's going to take time, where last night I was listening to the news, and they were talking about how democracy takes time. But we live in a world of instant gratification, because you can pick up your phone and you can film something and instantaneously it goes around the world. And we have been, and people forget, Facebook, I don't think has even been around 20 years. But we've become so used to these smartphones and instantaneously broadcasting something happening. We think democracy should happen the same way. Democracy is about education. It's about debating. It's about creating laws and tweaking those laws so that hopefully they will benefit the majority of the people. So good that you have a South Carolina Solid of a younger demographic, that hopefully maybe you want to educate folks about how government actually works, how democracy works, and why it's so important that we realize how it works. So your thoughts regarding that, Deontay. Now I'm back to Deontay. Maybe I just want your opinion now, Deontay.
Can you repeat the question?
What are your thoughts regarding democracy as a process? And it takes a while for things to happen in a democracy. And the question is, how do we get young people who are used to smartphones and instantaneous results to really understand that about democracy?
I think it comes with education and exposure to the actual process. We sit them down and we tell them about how this thing actually works, and we take them around to these different meetings and things that we attend. For example, I'm also advisor to the NAACP Youth Council. So a lot of the things that I want to do with my children there are to get them in front of individuals like the mayor, the chief of police, the sheriff, so on and so forth, so that they have not only exposure to these individuals, but understand their job and their role in the community. And I think that with that, then they will not only want to understand more about how democracy works, but maybe one day aspire to be in one of those positions themselves.
Very good. I agree with you. Ebony, your thoughts?
Well, if I can handle this and kind of dissect it just a little bit different, Miss Marilyn.
Sure, no problem.
I know what you're asking, but because my passion is education, it's not just education. I think it's the right type of education. I think it's about setting the stage for children, because, we need a younger demographic of people in place, and education and learning starts at home. We live in a world where, like you say, everything is instant, but if you are a parent or a grandparent, start with a small garden, start with a raised garden, where you can show a child when you put something on your plate, it didn't just come instantly. Somebody had to plant a seed. And when you plant that seed, this is how you do it. This is how long it takes to grow. Well, not only does it need time to grow, you have to prune. You have to pull the weeds even as you go along. And once it gets to a point where you can harvest it, sometimes you still can't eat it. You have to go in and wash it off. And once you wash it off, you may even have to plant it or put it up for the wintertime. That's how I grew up. And what that does is it teaches a child that things do not come instantly. It takes time, and there's work. There's real work that you have to put into this thing to the point that it gets on your plate and you can eat it and enjoy it. You have to go through that whole process. So when it comes down to understanding how how democracy works the exact same way. And it takes time, because part of our learning, and I think some of the disconnect is because it's not taught that way in school. We learn some things about it, but I think there's a bit of a disconnect. And I think that's also another issue that's being touched on about SC Solid. But me personally, looking at curriculum in the school system so that people can learn about democracy, because it's very hard to teach grown people about democracy after they're already grown.
And I don't disagree with you about that at all. One of my concerns, and I've worked with the youth even in summer camps, is that and I welcome all points of view. So this is all of us being educated and fleshing this out. I've worked in summer camps where we've educated the kids about a particular topic, etc., history, whatever it may be, and then we send them back into homes where they are not encouraged by their parents. And this actually defeats the purpose, where they're actually taught that that's not important.
Good point.
How do you, I don't want to say fix it, because we're not here to fix it. We can't fix it if people don't want to open their mind and realize I need to be educated also. But how do you mitigate that when you got some kid enthusiastic about some new information, they go home and they're into that home, and then it's immediately shut down? And we have to be honest about that this is happening. It's happening. This is one of our problems, where we can educate the kids, but you got parents who are so disconnected with what's happening, they actually shut that enthusiasm down, which then continues that vicious cycle. Do you have any thoughts about that, Ebony?
That's a hard one, Miss Marilyn. It's hard. When I was
it is a hard one. It is.
That's a tough one. Again, SC Solid, we talked about during the time where in school they had a program where when it was time to vote, they had a miniature polling booth for youth, and they would give us 100 extra test grade if we went out and voted. And they'd give us a sticker, and if we brought that sticker back to school, our teacher would give us an extra 100, and the teacher would praise us and say, hey, you did that was a right. We learned about a right that we was able to actually go out and exercise. But I'm really not sure of that one, Ms. Marilyn. Deontay, you may have more to.
Yeah, Deontay, it has a black male. I actually do want your opinion on that, because that brings a totally different opinion and point of view regarding that. What are your thoughts regarding educating the kids but sending them back into homes that do not encourage that education?
Well, this is certainly a loaded question, and it's quite difficult, as Ebony said. But the only way that we can do this is to also educate the parents or the guardians, and have them to appreciate the importance of the issues that we are teaching the kids. Because if they're not encouraging this, sadly, through conditioning, the kids aren't gonna be involved in it anymore either, or aren't gonna be interested in it. So I think first we need to get the community at large interested in these issues, so that when we also get the children interested in these issues, the parents are still encouraging the kids to grow. One of my favorite quotes is from Frederick Douglass, and it goes, it's easier to build strong children than to try to fix broken men. So
yes,
it's important that we instill these things that we want in the children early. so that we're not trying to fix those broken men later on.
So this allows a segue into another question. But before I do, I want my station break. I gotta have my station break, y'all. I want to remind everyone that you are watching A Gathering Place, hosted by the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, and we're having a very interesting conversation today with representatives from South Carolina Solid, an emerging activist organization in Georgetown, South Carolina, and beyond. Welcome to Ebony and Deontay. So Deontay, segueing a little bit from what you just spoke about, do you think this is a mental health issue?
Absolutely. Mental health, certainly in the African American community, is something that is missing, and something that is not taken as seriously as we likely should. If we being real, a lot of times instead of going and seeking mental health advice, we think that we can go to church and pray everything away. Church is a good thing, and I love my pastor. However, the church isn't going to fix these mental health issues. We need to go and seek a mental health counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and we need to get to the root of these issues, because if these things aren't addressed, it only gets worse. It doesn't get better on its own. It's not going to fix itself. And going to seek mental health, a mental health professional to help you in these situations doesn't make you weak. It doesn't make you any less of a person. It just makes you human. It just means that you need help. Because I can speak for myself. After my last deployment to Afghanistan, I actually ended up getting hurt, and that's why I was medically retired. So for a long time, I dealt with things like PTSD, even survivor's guilt and stuff like that. And I dealt with that thing on my own for a long time, because in my opinion, if I went and I seeked help, well, that means that would mean that I'm weak. That would mean that I'm less than a man. That means that the soldiers under me wouldn't look up to me as a leader and things of that nature. But that's not the case. And we have to kill that train of thought and that school of thought that says seeking mental health help makes you weak. It does not make you weak. It makes you interested in having a better and more full life. And it helps you, not only you, but it helps the individuals around you who care about you to have a better life as well. Because if you're married, I promise you, your wife is going to appreciate you getting that help. Or your husband.
I'll take your word for that one, Deontay. I want everyone to know also that Deontay is a social worker. So I did not randomly just throw that question out there. He is a social worker out here doing the work. Ebony, what are your thoughts regarding mental health in our community? And when I say our community, we're African American, y'all. Clearly, all of us are African Americans here. But this impacts everyone. But your thoughts, Ebony?
Mental health is actually, I am on a task force in Georgetown County with Judge Bone. I see it a lot. There are a lot of issues that are entangled. That's a crazy word to use right now, but it's interconnected when it comes down to mental health, because some of the issues that people face are because they do have issues that have not been addressed. And then they go on and other things that go on in their life is just aspirated. But when it comes down to, and I want to make sure that I address your question, Ms. Marilyn. Your question was, how does mental health play into children being shut down at home?
And also activism, because all of this is interconnected. And we went from children being shut down from home. That is not healthy. That is not a healthy mental place. It's not, when they're being shut down. So I think if people were mentally healthy, they would recognize that my child is coming here with knowledge. I need to encourage rather than shut it down. And we're facing a problem in our community because too many kids are getting some knowledge. They're getting educated, but they go back into households that are not healthy. And this is actually skimming the surface of it, because then it also leads, when you have mentally unhealthy households, you're talking domestic violence.
Yes.
You're talking all kind of issues going on. But go ahead, Ebony.
So basically, I think that the report said about 86% of families are dysfunctional, and whatever family situation a child is in. So that speaks volumes to how large and how deep this issue would be, which is why I think it's really important that schools do a better job of having mental health available to all the students. And one thing from volunteering with the school that I see is that mental health is very scarce at schools. Here in Georgetown County, I forgot how many, only a certain allotment of schools actually have mental health counselors, which speaks to if a child has issues, where can they go? Who can they talk to? Because although the teachers are like parents to most of the students, teachers can't always do that. The teacher's job is to educate. So they need to have that on site. But now with the pandemic going on, mental health needs to be available telemedicine wise, virtually, so that students can still have a person to talk to. But I see that that's a new resource, just like how children have recess, they have lunch, they have band and all different kind of things. Mental health and having group sessions and individual sessions need to somehow need to be added into schools. But there is a shortage of mental health providers, so that's something that we need to work on.
Yes, thank you. It is. And I want to get to a particular question because we're going to be wrapping up in a few minutes, but it's by David Warner. And let's have this discussion about this. As a white male, how can we contribute and help? What role can I have to be there for our Black friends? What would you suggest? And he also continued that with, I've spent so much time watching these videos and talking to my Black friends. I want to hear their stories and hear how I can be involved in a real and productive way. So we definitely want to get that. So let's go back to Deontay for the moment. Deontay, your thoughts regarding that, and I'll put that back up also.
Well, first of all, thank you for that comment, Mr. David. And I think that first of all, by being curious and actually wanting to seek out more information, well, you're doing the first step that you need to do to help us. The first thing that you need to do is inform yourself of the actual issues and get a great understanding of possibly some of the things that we're going through. And I think that you're at the point right now where you're trying to do that. So that's step number one. And step number two, I think, is to, once you go ahead and you educate yourself on the real issues, identify maybe some of the biases that you may have. And let's get this understood. A bias does not mean racism. Everybody has biases. A bias just means a preference. I'm biased against Fruit Loops. I prefer Sugar Pops. So I'm biased about my cereal. That doesn't make me racist. But everyone has biases or biases, however you want to say it, about certain things. So the next step is to do a self-inventory and understand the personal biases and how they may affect others, whether knowingly or unknowingly to us. So step number one, education, figure out the issues. Step number two, self-inventory and understanding your biases. And then number three, I would say, is get out there and not only be what we call an ally, but to kind of advocate against others once you identify the biases that exist that are going out and doing some of these things that are hurtful towards the Black community. It's one thing to say that I'm not racist or I don't have these views, but it's another to be anti-racist. So we need individuals who are anti and not just saying that, oh no, that's me. We need people that are gonna get involved and when your friends say something, say, hey, that ain't right. I don't agree with that. And address it right then and there. And I think that will go a long way as far as helping with some of these issues that we have. Specifically to mental health, I think that some of the things that anybody in general can do is promote mental health. I think that mental health is something that's not discussed enough, and it's something that's become maybe even a little taboo. So it's something that we need to start talking about even as early as grade school, because these issues need to be addressed early. And sadly but true, especially in the African American community, there are issues in mental health situations that go either undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. Um, for example, I believe that many African American children are overdiagnosed with things like ADHD and things of that nature. But that's another talk for another time. But we certainly need to have this treatment, the right treatment, in place at an early age so that these things are addressed and treated early in life, and so that we can have productive citizens as adults.
Very good,
Meow.
Ebony.
And also, I'm sorry, let me add this as well. To go back a little bit about what we were talking about earlier. In a household where there's mental health going on, maybe with an adult, so they're not taking the situation seriously with the child as far as some of the things that are being learned. If I was to go into a household like that, I would look at it from what's called the strength perspective, and I would say, okay, this is what's going on. This is the strengths of this family. This is the issue with this family. And I would look and I would try to isolate the one particular problem that's going on, because what we need to understand is, as a system, everything is interconnected. So if the parent ain't doing good, the child ain't doing good. So no matter what we try to do for that child, it ain't gonna get no better until we help with that parent. So I think we need to address the community as a whole, and that's how we pick everybody up.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes, Ebony.
He mentioned a good point, and a long time ago when I would say that, people look at me like, that's kind of crazy. Women and men, people are usually used to putting their kids first, and what happens is mom and dad, they get weighed down. So what I always try to tell parents, and I still hold true to this today: take care of yourself first, so that you can be 100% for your family. If you do it in reverse order, you can't work off of a empty vessel. But as it pertains to all of our white allies out there, Mr. Warner, to answer your question, is that I agree with everything Deontay said. But here's one thing that I want Black and white to know. You can't change the heart of a person. You can't make somebody like you. Even if it had nothing to do with white and Black, you can't make your neighbors like you. There's nothing you can buy or say or do to make a person like you. So when it comes down to white people being allies for us, I think it starts at home when you have conversations with your family and friends. If they say something out of line, either put them in line or disassociate with that type of engaging in that type of conversation. But I think long term, because again, you can't make anybody like you, but long term, I think that white folks can help out more in a policy in legislative, and that means talking to your own connections, that they can help change some of the things that actually promote racism. And that's the thing that SC Solid that we're working on. We realize that long-term change is going to come through policy and law. So if you are white and you can be involved, or if you have connections with people that have the ability to make those type of changes, that's how I would love to see help from those who are trying to help, like Mr. Warner. And I appreciate everything that you are doing.
I want to point out, because I'm a big advocate of educating, motivating, and activating folks regarding the issues in our community. But if you have a healthy environment, and that environment is our natural environment, but also your environment at home, the environment in your schools, you will create healthy individuals, healthy human beings. And in turn, you will create healthy communities. You cannot disconnect anything here, folks. And I think people need to realize that, which leads to this notion of being anti-racist as opposed to non-racist. And I agree with Deontay on this. If you're going to be a white ally, you have to be anti-racist if you expect to make any kind of impact. And what do we mean by that? Anti-racist means taking action. If someone says something unhealthy, such as using the N-word or any racist derogatory terms, you need to call them out then. And that's hard. So let's recognize that, because if you're used to not saying anything, it is hard to flip where you're calling people out. And that's what we need white allies to do. We are not in your spaces. Not most of
And,
us. We're
and you
not.
may even lose
Go
a
ahead.
few friends over there too, Miss Marilyn.
And
And
family
so let's
members.
recognize that as
Thank you.
well. But
Yeah.
the thing is, are those the type of friends that you really want to have?
Thank you. And you also have to ask yourself, why can I mentally not call them out? That's a mental health issue, folks, because you are not being your authentic self. You're not being true to yourself, because you know when you speak out and it bothers you, you know that it's bothering you because you know it's wrong, that you did not speak out. So you have to start figuring out, why am I not speaking out? You have to go on that mental health journey to get to a place where you can speak out. It is not enough to be non-racist and say, oh, that was terrible what Uncle Billy said, to getting to the place where you call out Uncle Billy and say, Uncle Billy, that was wrong, and I will no longer tolerate that in my presence. And you have to be strong enough mentally, emotionally, physically to recognize, as Deontay just said, I may lose some friends over this. I may lose some family over this. But what you gain will be so much more. You'll gain self-respect. And let me tell you, when you start doing that self-respect, you will be amazed how many other people will be attracted to you. And I didn't want to really drill it down that far, but that's the truth, because we have all been on this journey. I've been on this journey, not necessarily regarding the anti-racist and non-racist, but we are all going through a journey. And mine, to get here with the Gullah Geechee Chamber of Commerce, was I went to a therapist because I suffered from depression, and I knew I needed help because it was holding me back. And then I also went to business classes, and those two lanes together allowed me to step away and start building something even bigger than myself. So, and that's a mental health journey. We are all in this together, folks. Someone posted it needs to be non-color. First of all, I'm not even gonna get into that. Mental health needs to be, non-colorblind, because that's a whole nother conversation. I like my color, so it can't be colorblind because you're erasing me. But the nature, we have to recognize, mental health crosses all barriers, all borders. All right. We don't have to come from a colorblind place, because it is already covering everybody. All right. So any thoughts
Mental
as
health
we wrap
can't
up?
be
Go ahead, Deontay.
colorblind. And I understand the notion and what is meant by that, but mental health can't be colorblind because of the simple fact that mental health is specific to the individual. So when you look at the individual, everything from race, gender, sexual orientation, culture, everything has to be taken into account right there when you begin to treat that individual. So it can't be colorblind. It has to be specific to that individual, which includes color, race, all the above.
Yes, because Black folks and mental health is impacted differently just because of our color of our skin. We deal with a lot of stuff that impacts our mental health. So it cannot be colorblind, just for example. All right, Ebony.
Everybody getting the hurricane warning.
I
am. But seriously, this also leads into another issue. And I know we're trying to wrap up, but I just want to put this out there. In the Black community, lack of access to healthcare is a major issue. And when you want to seek treatment, but you don't have the funds or the means to do it, that's a barrier with receiving help, which is why I believe that in this case, when it comes down to the schools should play more of a role with having mental health available at their sites for not only the child, but just like Mr. Deontay said, for the parents as well.
Very good. Yes, thank you. And it comes back full circle.
Right, it comes back full circle. I mean, right now, schools will offer dental services at school. If they can offer dental services, then mental health services can also be available more readily than what it is right now.
Yeah. There is a path to this. There's a path to this solution. And it's interesting that we went into this direction, but I'm going to bring it back full circle now to our discussion so we can wrap up the show. For South Carolina Solid to be created, you had to have people who are on a healthy mental health journey. If you are broken, you cannot help your community. And that's what South Carolina Solid is about. A group of people who recognize a problem, a challenge in their community, and they're trying to solve it by changing laws and ordinances. And it's a huge big thing to change laws and ordinances, but I understand from South Carolina Solid, they're going to drill down into specific issues as they move forward and addressing those laws and ordinances to address it, to change them so we can have healthier individuals and healthy communities. And this is a prime example how everything is interconnected. You cannot disconnect anything. So Deontay and Ebony, I'm gonna let you have quick last minute thoughts here. We'll start with Deontay and then wrap up with Ebony. Deontay, any last minute thoughts that we need to know about South Carolina Solid and the subjects that we touched on today?
No last minute thoughts per se. I will only say thank you for having us, Miss Hemingway. We appreciate the platform. To the viewers listening, please get involved. If you see something wrong, do something. Cause some good trouble. And I will leave you with this saying that I say often: I love you all, but remember to love yourselves.
Very good. Thank you very much. And Ebony.
Well, Deontay should have wrapped up because I couldn't have done it that good.
We'll remember that next time.
Well, I appreciate everybody for hopping on today. Thank you for introducing us to South Carolina Solid today, Miss Marilyn. For anyone that would like to participate, please, we encourage you to go to our Facebook page and like us so that you can hear about what we're doing, what's going on, and whenever we put out posts on ways that you can help us. Because it really takes everybody. It takes a village to raise a child, and it's going to take everybody hands on deck, everybody on the same page to also make long-term changes. So thank you.
That is correct. And we are like putting out some really good quotes today. I have to say, some meaningful, deep quotes today. So thank you very much. Thank you, Deontay. Thank you, Ebony, for coming out today and introducing us to South Carolina Solid. It's been a very interesting show. And I want to remind everyone that you are watching A Gathering Place, and we come to you every Sunday and Wednesday at 4 p.m. So come on back to Facebook Live and YouTube Live and check us out. Drop us some questions. And if you are interested in being a guest on A Gathering Place, just shoot me a message at Marilyn at GullaGeeCheeChamber.org. That's Marilyn at GullaGeeCheeChamber.org. We look forward to seeing you next time on A Gathering Place. Thank you, Deontay. Thank you, Ebony. And we will see you later.
Thank you.